Nothing completes a system launch quite like a polished, beautiful racing game. Fast frame rates, gorgeous vistas, and extreme speed is what I'm talking about. Titles such as Ridge Racers on PSP, Project Gotham Racing on Xbox, and F-Zero on the Super NES blew us away when they launched on their respective consoles. Now in 2017, there's a new game to add to the mix. The best looking portable racing game ever made. Fast RMX. Fast RMX is the first and only 3D game currently available for Nintendo Switch, designed to run at 60 frames per second while pushing high quality lighting, materials, and post-processing techniques. It's a game that looks great on a home console, but when you throw this onto a portable system and play it on the go, there's nothing quite like it. Suffice it to say, we were very impressed by this game. The developer of Fast RMX is none other than Shinen Multimedia, a talented studio that has long been known for pushing the limits of Nintendo hardware, going back to the Game Boy Color days. The series started out on the Wii as Fast Racing League before getting an incredible sequel on Wii U known as Fast Racing Neo. Fast RMX then is an evolution of Neo with 6 new tracks, all the DLC, and a host of interesting technical improvements. Fast Racing Neo was already incredibly impressive on the Wii U, with support for features such as physically based rendering, high quality motion blur, and loads of screen space effects. It's a game which pushes visual features that were highly uncommon on that platform, and in 2017, it still holds up remarkably well as a console title. But when you pull it out of the dock, the effect is transformative. There really is no other portable game on the market that compares to Fast RMX. It's a feeling we had way back in 2004 with the PSP and a copy of Ridge Racers. In some ways it feels like you're holding a device from the future. Looking at the limited selection of games available on Switch at launch, there has been a sense that the platform is only slightly stronger than the Wii U, but Fast RMX brings the heat with a presentation that eclipses what was possible on that system, even when running undocked. So what does Fast RMX offer over the original then? The first improvements start here, in the menu, with a brand new front end redesigned for 1080p output. The sharper visuals, smoother transitions, and the addition of an actual options menu are all welcome changes here. And the entire game is still less than 1 GB, coming in at 835 megabytes. Once on the track, each of which loads very quickly, first impressions suggest a similar looking game to the Wii U version, but if you jump back to the original, it quickly becomes evident that a lot has changed. The faster GPU featured in the Switch allowed the team to implement a more robust atmospheric light scattering system. On Wii U, a simple fast screen space approach was used, but with RMX each scene benefits from improved lighting precision and quality. Tracks have a new sense of richness that was missing from the original. In addition, dynamic lights were added to the vehicles in one specific track at least. Alongside the impressive rain and thunderstorm effects, vehicles now feature an actual dynamic headlamp. The raindrop on windscreen effect has also been reworked to appear more realistic than before. Fast RMX offers support for HD Rumble and might just be one of the best examples of the new feature. The effect was created by transforming frequency bands of the original sound effects across multiple vibration frequencies. These frequency bands were then equalized to get the final sensation. It's this mix of sound, vibration, and visual stimuli that really sells the effect. The most significant change, however, stems from improvements to image quality. On Wii U, Shinen employed a temporal upscaling of sorts which transformed a 640x720 image into a 1280x720 one. Unfortunately, shimmering and combing artifacts were common and gave the impression that the game was running at a lower overall resolution. It worked well enough considering the speed of the gameplay, but in transitioning to the Switch, the development team has made significant strides. Fast RMX ditches the temporal upscaling technique entirely, and instead makes the jump to an adaptive resolution feature, which sees the game dynamically adjusting rendering resolution based on load to avoid slowdown. In single player, you'll see the game regularly jump between 900p and 1080p. The result is image quality that greatly exceeds what we've seen on Wii U. But from what we understand, there is actually a small issue with the current firmware version on Switch, which causes a slight drain on GPU resources. And once corrected, we're told that Fast RMX will be able to sustain a full 1080p at all times in single player mode. In its current state, comparisons do reveal some interesting differences though. In some areas, the Wii U manages to actually resolve a full 720p pixel count without noticeable artifacts. Even then though, the Switch has a noticeable resolution advantage. But if we turn the camera around, the Wii U temporal upscaling produces noticeable flicker along the building edges here, while Switch remains much sharper and more stable in comparison. In certain rare instances, the pixel count can drop below 900p on Switch, with results not far off from what Wii U was aiming for. But if you look at the trees and scenery on Wii U, there is visible flickering present all across the scene. Even when the adaptive resolution drops to this level, it still looks much cleaner on Switch. Not to mention the lighting is more attractive. This next scene again highlights the improved light scattering and the new dynamic HDR exposure option included in the Switch version. Tracks appear more vibrant on the new console, while the Wii U is dull in comparison. Speaking of that feature, both the HDR exposure option and chromatic aberration can be disabled via the options menu. Always nice to be able to adjust the visuals to suit your taste. In split screen mode, the adaptive resolution feature is a little more active, but this allows the game to maintain 60 frames per second. We found that the game sticks rather closely to 900p most of the time while using this mode. But one of the big features here is the jump to full 60 frames per second in 3 and 4 player split screen. On Wii U, this option was dropped to 30 frames per second, but the Switch manages to pull it off without sacrificing performance. Unfortunately, I don't yet have enough controllers for Switch to test the full 4-person experience, but you can kinda get the idea here with the 3-player mode. Which brings us to performance as a whole. Just how successfully does Fast RMX hold onto its target 60 FPS? Well, first, as a refresher, the Wii U turned in a mostly stable level of performance, but on some of its tracks, you could run into issues like this. Small pockets of slowdown that dropped performance below the 60 frames per second line. Tackling that same stretch of track on the Switch though, not a hitch to be found. Performance is locked at a 60 frames per second throughout and it looks great. If we compare both Switch and Wii U in a side-by-side configuration then, we see that 60 frames per second is achieved without issue here, on both machines even, but on Switch we never even run into those minor frame rate drops we saw earlier. But really, this is the kind of performance you should expect from the single player mode, a virtually flawless 60 frames per second. And the same can be said of the portable mode as well, where the base resolution drops to 720p, but performance remains strong, just a couple tiny frame time drops. It's this mix of incredibly rich visuals and perfect performance that really makes Fast RMX stand out as the new standard for portable racing games. So we've established that it runs like a dream in single player mode, but how does split screen fare? To draw comparisons once again, here's what we see on Wii U. Drops that persist below the 60 FPS line in some situations. Not entirely unexpected, but it does interrupt the fluidity somewhat. On Switch, however, even on the busiest tracks such as this rain-soaked environment, the frame rate holds almost completely steady in both docked and handheld mode. Yep, you can play the game in split screen mode at 60 frames per second on a handheld system. Very cool. Of course, it's not 100% perfect in this mode either. Throughout our test sessions, we ran across exactly 3 drops, which occurred like this. A momentary drop in frame time consistency that interrupts gameplay for a couple of seconds. It's much less bothersome than some of the drops on Wii U at least, but worth noting nonetheless. Oh, and here's a quick peek of the game running in 3-player split screen mode, but I wasn't able to test this as fully as I would have liked since I'm attempting to control 2 crafts at once. Not so easy. All in all though, performance here is excellent on the Switch. Fast RMX is one of those rare console games that aims for 60 frames per second and effectively maintains it at all times. That it can run so well in handheld mode is even more impressive. Which ties right back into my initial thoughts that this is the most impressive looking portable game we've ever played. The mix of highly detailed visuals and a super fast frame rate makes for a very strong impression. If you're looking for a way to show off what the Switch hardware can do, Fast RMX is a perfect choice. Beyond that, the game itself is a lot of fun with tight controls, great track design, and a load of content. But that's all we have here for the moment. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on Twitter. And until next time, this is John signing off.